Elder abuse, baby boomers. I know that term is familiar to so many people, but we understand that baby boomers are now the highest level ever in the United States. And that's quite a challenge. We're going to discuss that challenge with my guest, Renee Mayat, who's back with us again. Thanks for joining us again on Brooklyn 45.
Thank you again.
And I know that when we ended the last program, we talked about what safety net resources are available. So let's talk about the safety net resources that are available for baby boomers and beyond.
I think what happens in terms of a safety net for, like you said, baby boomers and beyond, is that what I do in my practice, I always have folks take out what they call estate instruments. So it's estate planning. In other words, I think that your audience is aware that most people, one of the primary things they should have is a will. And so a will is your ability to put in writing what you want your loved ones to have after you pass this world. And so everyone should have a will. And I know some people think, well, what do I have? Why should I have a will? And you realize when you sit down and put it together, you probably have more than you think. Whether it's the sofa, the television, the brooch that you want to give someone, those things can be put in a will. Because if you don't put it in a will, then it gets to go to anyone, really. But if you specifically want someone to have it, you can indicate that in the will. Another safety net that baby boomers and beyond can have is also a power of attorney. Because one of the things with baby boomers, and I think we may have raised it in the last program, is that folks are living longer. So as a result of people living longer, you could look up and find yourself in an unfortunate situation where you're incapacitated. But you still need to handle your business, meaning your rent needs to be paid, your mortgage needs to be paid, your bills. Because if you're, let's say, in a hospital, those things still go on. Your landlord still wants his rent. The people holding your mortgage still want their mortgage. So a power of attorney allows you to have somebody in place to pay those bills for you. The other safety net that a person needs is a health care proxy. With baby boomers and again beyond, we find ourselves going to hospitals and doctors more frequently. And as a result of that, you want someone to be in a position to make healthcare decisions for you if you cannot. And then one of the last instruments, if you will, that in terms of a safety net that baby boomers and beyond need is something called a living will. Some years ago, I don't know if you recall, there was a situation, I think it might have been in Florida, where a young woman found herself in a coma, and the family and the husband were at odds about what to do. I think one faction wanted the plug to be pulled, if I can say that, and another wanted her to remain. In the absence of a living will, you're going to have that kind of struggle. You're going to have that kind of contention. When you have a living will in place, what you're saying to somebody is, okay, these are my wishes. I want somebody to remove me from life support, or I don't. But someone only can follow that if it's written down. So those are the safety nets from a legal standpoint that anybody should have. And baby boomers, not just segregated to baby boomers, but anybody should have, because those are the protective legal documents that allows your world to continue when you can't do it for yourself.
In our last program, we talked about dementia.
Yeah.
If someone wants to safeguard their future, even though they may be 60, 70, 80, 90 you mentioned, they still think that they're able to safeguard their future, and they want to take responsibility for the living will and other instruments. Do you experience this tug of war between that person's wishes and the family members who think that they should have some say as to what these safety net items need to be?
Oh, that's always a big issue. That's a big struggle, because a lot of times what happens is sometimes my office gets the call not from the baby boomer parent, but from the adult children. And the adult children think it's important for their parent or loved one to have these instruments in place. And they're not wrong about that. They're right about that. But the reality is that sometimes, not all the time, sometimes the adult children can be a little persuasive and overbearing and want certain things done or placed in these instruments, which are at odds with the
Wishes,
parent.
yes.
That's right. So what happens is, as a lawyer, what I have to do is I have to separate it. I have to speak to the loved one, the parent, alone, in the absence of the children, because this is something that's created for the loved one. And I've had situations, even not necessarily elderly parents, but I've had situations where a woman comes in my office and she is there with, loved ones, whether they be adults or nephews, nieces, and speaks openly about what she wants to do. And then call me the next day and change everything. Because what she recognized, and it's hard, because these are your, whether they're your children, they're your family. And sometimes you don't want strife, but sometimes strife arises. And how do you avoid strife is you do put it in writing. Not to say you're not going to have it. Not to say you're not going to have some family member coming to try to contest the will, saying, listen, she always wanted me to have the mink coat, but the mink coat they gave now to Aunt so-and-so. You're always going to have that. But if it's in writing, there's a strong argument that your wishes, which you put in the will, are going to be honored. So yes, you're always going to have, as long as there are people, there's always going to be strife.
What about the issue of scam artists?
Now, scam artists in terms of the elderly, that's a big one. That's a real big one. What happens, probably more times than not, the elderly sometimes they live alone. Family members are not around. Either they're not in the same borough, sometimes they're not even in the same state. And if elderly folks are alone, they get calls, kind of unsolicited calls. You probably experience, sometimes your phone rings off the hook, telemarketers, all kinds of people trying to sell you something. And there are scam artists, and they prey on the elderly. I mean, they're kind of just dialing numbers at random. They get someone on the phone that sounds like they're kind of up in age. That's their opportunity to take advantage. The new scam that's happening now, you've probably heard about this, Sam, is the one involving the IRS, where folks are calling up, pretending to be IRS agents, and saying that the person owes money to the IRS, and they should send X number of dollars to the IRS. And I've had clients who come in believing that that's legitimate, fearful, because most folks are kind of fearful of, as we call him, Uncle Sam. And so they come in thinking that, oh, I've got to pay somebody. And it's only once they hired me that I got to the bottom of it and recognizing that it was a pure scam. And now I think more people are becoming aware of it, certainly hopefully after your program today, that folks will be aware that there's an actual IRS scam. And even when you call the number back, it says IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. So why wouldn't you think it's legitimate? But it's not.
Like a scam I just had about a certain bank that shall remain nameless. And when they followed through, it wasn't from that bank at all.
Right.
But let's talk about financial exploitation, not just from the scam artists, but perhaps from relatives. What advice do you give to seniors?
Yeah, I think you asked, and I think the last segment when I was here, you asked about what fears the elderly have. One of the other fears that they have is that someone is going to take their hard-earned money. They have worked all of their lives and saved, and now they're believing, and sometimes they believe it's close family members who are going to take their money from them. And so it does become a struggle sometimes, because particularly if the elderly person has dementia, part of it is a feeling, and someone may call it paranoia, but sometimes it may be legitimate. The reality is that when someone is in your home, if your loved one is in your home, and they have resources, let's say they get a pension, a 401k, some retirement benefits coming to them, Social Security on a monthly basis, that's income in your home. So the reality sometimes is that folks can take advantage of your financial wealth because you're now a financial resource for them.
Yes.
And people can and do take advantage. When I'm sitting down with a client and we're going over a power of attorney, and the elderly client says to me, I want son Joe to be my attorney in fact, to handle my business and financial affairs should something happen to me. One of the things I say in front of my elderly client and in front of son Joe is that the client has to be aware that once they give the power of attorney to this person, that person can leave my office and head right to their bank and take everything out, because that's the power of the
Yes.
power of attorney.
Yes.
So the decision I'm explaining to the elderly client, you don't take it lightly. You've got to be able to give it to someone you trust. And nowadays, you know, that may be hard. That may be hard. But those are some of the abuses that happen with the elderly, and some of the ways that people can take advantage of the elderly is the recognizing that they do have a financial resource that may be a little better than the person who's out to get it.
People have friends in their 20s and their 30s that they hang out with, in their 40s and their 50s. But once they are in a home, or if they're at home alone, very often friends, they've either passed away or they are no longer as close to them as they used to be. Networking. That networking that you've done at an earlier age, is that still possible, and is that still encouraged?
It's hugely encouraged. It's hugely encouraged probably from, and again, I'm not a physician, probably from a medical aspect, just in life in general. And what I mean by that is this. There are studies that have been done in terms of the kind of dementia, and part of that is socializing. Part of that is neuro. Brooklyn has a wonderful place that is called 966. That's on Fulton Street. And they host events for seniors. They host jazz events. And what happens is that some of your famous jazz artists are also up in age.
I actually went to one. I was invited by a lady who was in her 80s.
Okay.
It was a jazz concert. And I looked around and they were all seniors there.
That's right. That's right. And there's the quiet joke, if you will, is that seniors are living longer because they're listening to jazz. And because it keeps you youthful. And they remember the time when it was, you know, they were in their 20s and 30s, and they were out in the scene, so to speak, and they were dancing to this music, this jazz music, a lifeblood in them. And so networking is extremely important, and that's where you can socialize at those type of events. And there are probably a wealth of other places that seniors can go to and be part of the social world that allows their mind to keep active and allows them to develop friendships, and that so they're not alone.
Renee Myatt, I want to thank you for being my guest on Brooklyn 45. There are resources that are available. We're going to put some of that on our Facebook page, but off the top of your head, what are some of the resources that you recommend?
Well, I recommend off the top of my head that the person get a last will and testament, that they do the power of attorney, the healthcare proxy, and the living will. Those are the instruments that I spoke about. That is a safety net. Once you have that, you probably, then everything else is kind of gravy.
Oh, gravy, yeah. And I think as you get older, the gravy is more and more important.
Absolutely.
Not the real gravy, not that stuff you put into your mouth, but the additional benefits and the things that make you smile as an older person.
Right. Right.
Thank you for being my guest on Brooklyn 45, Renee Myatt. And again, your office is?
Yes, it's the law office of Renee Myatt, and the phone number is 718-468-3588.
Why do you do this? Why have you done this so long? 31 years.
Why have I?
And you don't look as though you are old enough, 31 plus whatever that was when you started.
Well, that's a nice
old.
compliment. That's a nice compliment. But yes, I've been doing this 31 years. I was able to go to school in Boston. I went to school, Boston University, undergrad. I went to Boston University Law School. And when I graduated law school, I became a prosecutor. So I was a prosecutor in the Bronx. I did that for 6 years. And then I went to work for a corporate firm where I did civil work. And I stayed with them until they went out of business, and I opened my own firm. And I've been in my own firm for now 21 years.
And it's not just about the money, but it's about giving back as well.
Exactly.
This is Brooklyn 45. Thank you very much for being my guest.
Thank you so
Renee
much.
Myatt.
Thank you so much.
Here with us today is Isabella Packer. She attends St. Francis Xavier located in Park Slope. She's a consistent honor roll student with a solid GPA of 90+ average. Hi Isabella, how are you?
Good, and you?
I'm good. So, do you mind telling our viewers what motivates you to do well in school?
Really just the need for success. I always like to keep my grades up, and I really just like succeeding. So, really, it's not much of a motivation as much as how I want to do
Yeah.
it.
So, for students who maybe struggle or don't find that passion that you have to do well in school, what advice would you give them in order to succeed?
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
That's a good one. So, how do you find time to balance keeping a solid 90 plus average and being a 12-year-old slash teenager?
Well, I always make sure to get my homework done as soon as possible on Fridays. And I never really make many plans unless it's Friday night. And really, it's all with how you balance the time. So if you're writing an essay, don't get up to do a phone call. Just finish the essay and then do the phone call.
Yeah, that's true. So, how do you see yourself in the future? Why a doctor?
I don't know. Surgery really interests me in something. Is either by visual explanation or it's easy. And sometimes it's difficult. Like for me, sometimes the format.
Yeah. And being that you are a 90 plus, times do they even ask you for help? Yes, they do. And if they're
But I was leaning more towards because
tuition. Welcome, Maritza. How are you?
Good.
So, do you
It weighs 10 pounds.
okay?
I guess don't go lower than what you know you can do.
You found out that you got a scholarship towards your tuition. How did your parents react? How did you?
We for skincare, you know.
Yeah.
Um. Okay. The most simplest thing is
Yeah.
just practice, and you'll eventually get it. It'll become so. Um. Yeah, I can have simple conversations.
Okay. So, if there was any lasting advice you want to get to any of our viewers, what would that be?
cranky, all signs that your child has the flu. Your child not getting sick. Don't wait till it's too late to get your children